Hello everybody, my name is Ratnos, and in today's video, we are going to take a look at the dungeon journal for the upcoming raid, Amirdrassil. Just kind of, the goal here is just, we're going to look through, we're going to read the mechanics, we're going to see what the bosses look like they're going to be. I'll draw comparisons to previous fights when they exist, and just kind of get an idea for what we're looking for in the new raid. These sorts of videos, I always like making them. I like looking back on them after the tier and see what changed between now and then, and also maybe it'll be helpful to kind of give you a little bit of a basis so that when you watch PTR testing or watch the fights when they actually come out or do the fights when they actually come out, then that will be, you'll have a little bit of a baseline of information. If you're the kind of person who doesn't like having this information spoiled for you, totally understand. Very valid way to play as well. In which case, hope you'll catch me in some future videos, but there will be nothing here for you for the rest of this one. Okay, so let's start off with Gnarlroot. Gnarlroot is this fire tree thingy. First boss of the raid. Once a devoted protector of the Emerald Dream, this former ancient has been ravaged by flame and now only seeks to destroy. It's got stage 1 and an intermission. And in stage 1, the Flame Touch Ancient, which is the boss's... They often have this where the boss's name is kind of... Like, they decided it was Gnarlroot, but it used to be called Flame Touched Ancient, or Flame Tormented Ancient, and you can see here it's still called Flame Tormented Ancient, so, yeah. Infuses nearby Earth with Shadow Flame, causing it to explode after 3 seconds. The blasts do damage to enemies within 3 yards of the AoE. Some patches of Earth absorb the Shadow Flame energy, spawning dormant lashers. So swirlies that you dodge, and some of the dodges turn into lashers. Tainted lashers, so they spawn in a dormant state, but bloom when imbued with additional Shadow Flame energy by either Shadow Scorched Earth or Potent Fertilization, which I guess we'll take a look at in a bit. When the Lasher is roused, it deals damage to all enemies within 300 yards, okay? And then the Tainted Lasher spits thorns at a player, doing damage and giving them a stacking bleed for 10 seconds. Okay, there's also Tainted Treants, which have... I'm not sure if these get spawned as well. It doesn't look like they're spawned... Oh, okay, so this is a Mythic mechanic. They're probably spawned by the Pestilence Swirlies, but only on Mythic. They have an interruptible cast that deals fire damage to enemies within 50,000 yards. All right, we'll see if you can outrange that. Moonkins might be able to. And burning them for 6 seconds as well. So you're probably going to want to interrupt that. They also have a magic debuff that is in an AoE, maybe dodgeable, and then maybe also dispellable. I mean, definitely dispellable. That does damage and slows the people that it hits. Maybe also spread. Maybe you can't dodge it, but you can pre-spread to avoid this hitting everybody. Controlled Burn is from the boss again, which marks several players and plagues the ground they walk on, doing damage to players within 15 yards of their location every 1 second. Each target erupts after 6 seconds, inflicting some Shadow Flame damage to players within 15 yards and creating a patch of the Shadow Scorched Earth, which is going to do damage over time while you're inside of it. Okay, so these people are... This is going to be a, spread and take these to the edges of the room, I guess, is probably what this will look like. The Dreadfire Barrage is the tank mechanic, which shoots 5 missiles in rapid succession at the current target. Each one deals half physical, half Shadow Flame damage, and causes the target to take increased Shadow Flame damage for the next 34 seconds. This effect stacks, so you're probably using a big defensive on this, and then taunt swapping. Sometimes they make these mechanics where if you taunt in the middle of it, you'll taunt the later half. Like if you taunt after 2 missiles, the other 3 would go on the other tank. But with 34 seconds on this debuff, I kind of doubt that that's how this one is going to be. I think this is just going to be 5 that hit the one tank, and they are going to use a defensive to live it. Tortured Scream is flagged as a healer mechanic. This one does damage to the whole raid, and it also then pulses damage every 0.4 seconds for 10 seconds. Okay, so this is upfront damage and then also pulsing damage for 10 seconds. Big healer throughput moment. Shadow Flame Cleave. Oh, it's got a frontal. That's fun. So another nice little way your tank can kill people. Big Shadow Flame frontal, and I guess you're going to want to not have this debuff from the Dreadfire Barrage before this 1 million thing hits you. Although maybe it's one of the frontals that the tank can dodge as well. We also have the intermission phase, where Gnarlroot grows doom roots that absorb power from the earth, decreasing damage taken by 99% and causing him to pulse toxic loam. The Shadow Flame energy coursing through the earth awakens any dormant tainted lashers. Overpowered with Shadow Flame, chunks of splintering charcoal fly off his body every 8 seconds. So if there's any tainted lashers that are still dormant, they get activated in the intermission here. Roots do damage, quite a lot of damage to any players that are hit by them, and also knock them up. Corrupted soil is damage. Okay, so this looks like it is damage underneath. Yeah, okay. Reduces forced movement on players in the area. So this is, it looks like it's the ground underneath Gnarlroot that will be a dot zone and a slowy zone, but also reducing forced movement effects. So then the question is, are there any forced movement effects that you'd want to stand in this to avoid? Toxic Loam is just doing damage to the whole raid. Splintering Charcoal, this deals damage when it lands and makes people Ember Charred. Each piece of charcoal that does not hit a player erupts on contact with the earth, doing damage to everybody. So this is like Armageddon soaks. You want one person to soak each of them. Ember Charred. So if you touch a corrupted soil while you're affected by it, you remove the debuff that you get from soaking one of these, and also ignite the root. Interesting. Okay. Uprooted Agony. So that's probably how you exit the intermission, is you go and run into the corrupted soil with all of your Ember Charred debuffs. Torn from the earth, Gnarlroot shrieks in pain, inflicting 0 damage. That's probably going to change. To all players every 5.2 seconds for 20 seconds. He's immobilized and takes 100% increased damage during this. Expiration applies a stack of Rising Mania, which is a 10% increased damage effect for the rest of the fight. Okay, so this is going to be a intermission-based fight where you're going to go in and out and in, then out of the intermissions. And in the intermissions, he like roots himself and takes less damage. You soak the Armageddon soaks, and then you run on top of the boss and burn the roots that he's, rooted into the ground with. And once you do enough of that, then you get a big damage amp phase, while also it looks like your healers are going to have some stuff to heal. And yeah, this will be fun. I love bosses that take increased damage. Those are always fun to play, especially as first bosses. This looks like it'll be a pretty fun first boss. All right, let's move on to the next boss on the list. But first, a word from the sponsor of this video, u.gg/wow. That's right. They are back once again, and this is a website where you can go and you can check out information about various things in the game. There are tier lists that are data generated and show you how different things are performing in Mythic Plus. For instance, right now, Augmentation in the S tier. So are Shadow and Fire, although we've got those little arrows to let you know how things are changing there as well. No surprise, Augmentation didn't get nerfed recently. These other two did. So those arrows look roughly like I would have expected. Arcane going with the double green arrow as well, not surprising to me as well. The mage in my group has been messing around with that also. But you can also click through and go see things such as talent builds that people are running in Mythic Plus, on Tyran, on Fort. You can see stat prios. You can take a look at specific bosses in the raid. And again, we can see talent builds, we can see gear, we can see gems and enchants, any sort of information like this. This will be updated quickly upon the release of the new raid as well. And you'll be able to get access to good builds for each boss very quickly, generated using the data from those first couple of days of logs as soon as they start coming out. So very good site, especially at the start of the patch, which we are rapidly approaching. All right, up next is Igira the Cruel. This is a big ol' Kalashi Jaredin thing, it looks like. The model does not fit inside the model viewer currently. And this one is also a tier boss. Interesting. So maybe this is not actually a second boss, because, yeah, usually the tier bosses don't go there, so... But yeah, okay, either way, we're going to read it. We're going to read this in order. But yeah, so Igira the Cruel forges devastating weapons from the screams of her enemies. When the verdant realm of the Emerald Dream, or within the verdant realm of the Emerald Dream, the torturer seeks to expand her arsenal. I think Igira is also, you get the marks of Igira when you're doing the Farak assault, so she's one of Farak's, people, I guess his blacksmith or something. Her melee attacks also strike the next closest target. If no target is found, the primary target is struck again. Each melee attack also applies Drenched Blades. This effect stacks. This is a bleed that does Shadow Flame damage over time. And this effect stacks for 24 seconds. Ooh, good lord. That seems nasty on a... Because, okay, you have to have two tanks take the Shared Agony is the idea, right? And then but then this is gonna stack forever. Or maybe, I mean, it's 1.2 million physical damage. Yeah, that reads to me like that's something you're not gonna have to deal with for the whole fight. If it's just stacking up on your tanks the whole time, I mean, you could 4-tank it and just swap between two tanks, two different groups of 2 tanks, or maybe you could have DPS be one of the people that's getting hit by the second one. Or often when they make these fights where it hits the tank and the next closest person, sometimes you could cheese it and just have one tank get hit and just, be like a Brewmaster or something where they live anyways. Okay, Blistering Spear throws spears at random players, which deals damage to all players within 10 yards of the impact and creates an area of piercing torment, which just makes a player tethered to the ground and energizes Igira until the spear is destroyed. So this might be a spread mechanic and then break the people out that get hit, or it might just be possible to dodge all these spears entirely. But if the fact that it energizes Igira makes me think that it's probably a spread and then one person gets hit by each spear, but yeah, if multiple do, then that would, I guess, be quite bad. Twisting Blade is a line of blades that get sent at a nearby player that does Shadow Flame damage to players caught in their path. Interesting, so this is probably a dodge. Marked for Torment is a bunch of Shadow Flame damage and knockback to players within 45 yards and ignites 3 areas for Torment. Players who stand within a Torment diminish it, but also suffer from Gathering Torment. When fully absorbed, Igira forges 2 weapons based on which Torment players stood within, then dual wields them to combine their attacks. While she forges her weapon, each strike of her hammer launches searing sparks. If none of her torments are absorbed, she unleashes Ruinous End. Okay, so she makes like 3 different like colored pools, I guess, and you soak one of them, and then she forges based off of the other 2, or maybe you soak 2 of them and she forges based off of the 2 that you did and dual wields those colors. I don't see what the different... Oh, okay, it's these hacking, slicing, and fraying. Okay, so then Gathering Torment, this is what you get as you're soaking those 3 different puddles. This is a dot to those people. And then when it's removed, the wearers suffer flesh mortification, which means the next time you'd take Gathering Torment, you'd take 300% more damage. So this is going to be one of those things where you're going to need a rotation of people, and this only comes into play on Heroic or higher, but the first Gathering Torment, you'll probably have 2 different groups that, I'll do the first time, you do the second time, I'll do the third time, with, 4 DPS or something in each group or something. Searing Sparks, so this is the Igira's hammer that there'll be swirlies to dodge, and also every time, so this is kind of like the Forge Master in Neltharis. She's going to hit her hammer, there's going to be swirlies to dodge, and then there's also just going to be raid damage while she's doing that. Ruinous End says, so this is if you don't soak, she smashes the ground, inflicting 750,000 Shadow Flame damage to all players on impact. That's almost a one-shot right there. I mean, you could live that, right? But then you'll take 200,000 every second for 30 seconds. So that's not survivable. That is a wipe. Okay, so then the 3 different torments, hacking, slicing, and fraying. Hacking gives her this ability, Racking Skewer, which is, it looks like a tank damage thing, or maybe a target a random player, that inflicts 2.4 million damage split between all players within 8 yards of the impact. Afterwards, they're stunned for 10 seconds, and then she inflicts damage over time to everyone that wasn't hit by the initial impact. Good lord, that's nasty. That is super duper nasty. The choice between a stun, so like, if you could, what you would want to do is you just want one person to go and immune this, take all that damage, and then avoid the stun with an immune as well. But then the whole raid would get affected by this damage over time effect, which is 80,000 DPS per player that isn't getting hit by the initial impact, so that's nasty too. This seems like a really nasty torment. Let's see what Slicing Torment does. Igira leaps onto random player destinations, inflicting 750,000 Shadow Flame damage to enemies within 8 yards and knocking them back, also doing half damage to enemies outside 8 yards. On Heroic and Mythic, this also unleashes Devastation each time she leaps, which makes fire waves. So this is sort of like Rashok's jump, except it's at random players, and you'll have to dodge where she's going to jump, and then there's going to be waves of lava on Heroic and Mythic that you're also going to want to dodge. And then finally we have Fraying Torment, which hurls blades at several players, causing the next 800,000 healing to be absorbed. If the healing absorb expires naturally, the player's heart explodes, inflicting 457,000 Shadow Flame damage to the raid. On Heroic and Mythic difficulties, Heartstopper unleashes a vital rupture at the player's destination when it's removed, and this makes orbs erupt that do damage on impact and also additional damage over time to players who connect with the orbs. Okay, so I guess just swirlies that will dodge when Heartstopper gets fully healed. Yeah, I mean, this is, you're going to want to fully heal that, because that kind of healing absorb, or that kind of raid damage on the whole raid is not good. So my guess is that the worst of these is the Hacking Torment. 10-second stun just reads like really, really, really nasty to me, but I'm not 100% sure. So my guess is you'll try and get, I guess, Slicing and Fraying, but we'll have to see exactly how that works. And then finally, every time she reaches full energy, she increases her damage done by 10%, and that effect stacks. Cool looking encounter. All right, up next we have Volcoross. Volcoross, it is said that Volcoross the Lava Serpent is so vast that no creature has lived long enough to see him in its entirety. The Gargantuan Viper now coils himself around the Emerald Dream to devour it whole. Okay, so this is like a world serpent thing. That is cool. And we've got a model for the head and the tail. Okay. Let's take a look at some of these abilities. Worth noting, this boss does not drop a tier piece, so probably an earlier boss than Igira. Maybe second or something even. Serpent's Fury. This is an ability that spews a surging storm of fire, inflicting fire damage to all players every 0.5 seconds for 5 seconds. Several players combust with coiling flames. These players deal... Okay, so flames swirl around the target, doing 30,000 fire damage every second for 10 seconds to any players within the effect. Damage increases in a reduced area as the flames constrict. Upon exploration, they slither to a new target. Okay, so you're going to have a big AoE that does small damage around you, and then it's going to kind of coil in around you and become more deadly. And hopefully it doesn't hit you, but it hits anybody else that is in your AoE. But that's, I guess, not 100% confirmed. Then there's Burning Vertebra, which says, Volcoross's igneous skeleton emanates with blistering rage. Ooh, they're busting out the vocabulary words here. Inflicting 37,412 fire damage to all players every 2 seconds. Okay, so Serpent's Fury seems like it's kind of like a big phase thing that is going to happen sometimes throughout the fight, and there's going to be... People are going to have to deal with coiling flames, and healers are going to have to heal everybody. Flood of the Fireland says, upon reaching 100 energy, Volcoross submerges into the magma before erupting out again, launching 2 massive globs of lava that splatter across the arena. Each impact inflicts 3.3 million fire damage, split among all players hit, knocking them back and creating Hellboil. If either lava flood fails to hit at least 4 players, an extreme amount of damage is inflicted to all players, and Hellboil consumes the entire arena. Okay, so 4 players have to soak each one. That's a high enough number that you probably aren't going to try and have 4 immunes in each one, but instead you'll probably try and split like 10 and 10. And then you're taking 330k each from the 3.3 mil split, which is feasible. The ground is incinerated, so the Hellboils are ground that deals 166k fire every 1 second if you stand in it, so don't stand in that. Volcanic Disgorge causes Volcoross to retch chunks of searing bile at targets, doing fire damage within 3 yards of each impact, and again creating Hellboil, which is the same thing. Scorched Tail Crash says Volcoross's fiery tail emerges from the lava and slams the ring, inflicting 2.4 million physical damage and knocking back any player's hit. The Molten Shockwave inflicts an additional 83k fire damage to all players. On Heroic and above, tidal blazes seep out from the impact of the Scorched Tail Crash, which are fire waves that you're going to want to dodge. Okay, so there's just a big tail slam that does damage to the whole raid, but obviously does extra damage to anybody that gets hit, so don't get hit by that. Molten Venom is a tank mechanic that puts a fire dot on the current melee target and increases their damage taken from Cataclysm Jaws by 50% for 20 seconds. Cataclysm Jaws is 2 million physical and 415k fire damage on the current target. So presumably you're going to want to... This is an interesting tank mechanic. You're going to want to swap before the Cataclysm Jaws so that the tank doesn't have many stacks of Molten Venom when the Cataclysm Jaws hit them. So you're going to want to be looking at the timer. Hopefully you can taunt on the windup of Cataclysm Jaws instead of needing to look at a Bigwig's timer to get this handled well, because I think it'd be annoying if you needed that level of like add-on use to be able to manage this. Serpent's Wrath says, upon consuming the arena with Hellboil, Volcoross unleashes the full magnifying force of the Firelands, doing damage to all players and increasing his damage done by 5% every 0.5 seconds. So this is maybe the enrage of the fight, and it's maybe based on when enough of the floor is full of Hellboil, and the boss will then just start pulsing increasing damage until you die or it dies. And then finally, Combusting Rage says, if no targets are engaged in melee, Volcoross will vent waves of flame that inflict damage to all players. So, you know, don't leave melee if you're the tank. Interesting. I wonder when this Serpent's Fury thing happens. I wonder what causes that, because that read to me like an intermission type thing, but then Flood of the Firelands is what happens when he reaches 100 energy. So yeah, that'll be an interesting thing to see how exactly that plays. All right, up next is the Council of Dreams. The Council of Dreams are steadfast in their duties as defenders. Pip employs lethal trickery to confound his victims, while Urktos relies on brute strength. Erwin uses her wisdom and cunning to dominate the field and guide her fellow council members. So it's a council fight. We have Urktos, the bear druid, Erwin, the dryad, and Pip, the fairy dragon. Cool. And this one's also going to drop, I assume, yeah, Pip's Emerald Friendship Badge, a trinket we looked at in one of the other earlier videos about 10.2. You can go watch that video if you're interested. We looked at all the raid trinkets and stuff. So that is cool. Ooh, there's also a pattern here. Ooh, and a new embellishment. I got to look through the new embellishments at some point in one of these videos too. I must have missed those if they're all somewhere. See if I can find a Wowhead post about those for another video. Okay, so Rebirth is a mythic mechanic here that says, after years of battle, the council has formed a life-linking bond. Each boss begins to cast Rebirth at 1 health. Successfully casting Rebirth will cause the boss to recover 100% health. Bringing all 3 bosses to 1 health at the same time will break the bond. On mythic difficulty, a council member successfully casting it heals the caster to full health. Okay, what does it do on the lower difficulties? 30% on normal, 50 on heroic. No effect on Raid Finder. Okay, that makes sense. Dream Tactics is another mythic difficulty that says, members of the Council of Dreams coordinate their strongest attacks, causing 2 members to reach 100 energy at the same time. Interesting. And that is also a mythic mechanic that does not exist on the lower ones. Okay, Urktos, this is the bear druid. At 100 energy, Urktos deals physical damage to the whole raid over 20 seconds, growing in intensity by 5% with each pulse. While raging, he's vulnerable to magic. If it is not interrupted, so there must be some way to interrupt this, maybe by doing enough damage, maybe by breaking it, I guess probably by doing enough damage. If it's not interrupted, Urktos gains 500% increased damage done for the remainder of the encounter. So you're going to want to interrupt that. Barreling Charge is a tank mechanic that says Urktos focuses on his current target, charging them after 5 seconds, doing damage to all players in his path. Upon reaching his destination, he unleashes a Thundering Impact. Now, the Thundering Impact, okay, yeah, I expected this when I saw that this is a low amount of damage to all players hit. Urktos unleashes a Thundering Roar, inflicting physical damage among all players, reduced by each player charged through, and let me guess, each player charged through can't soak the next one. Yep, increasing damage taken from Barreling Charge by 500% for 1 minute. So this is going to target the tank. The tank is going to walk backwards or walk to the side or something, and a team of like 5 or 6 people are going to walk in, get hit by the charge. It's going to reduce the raid damage, and then the next time that mechanic comes out, it's going to be on the other tank, and you're going to have a different set of 5 or 6 people come in and reduce the damage to the raid, and you're going to keep alternating those teams. Agonizing Claws is another tank mechanic here that just does 2 million damage to all players in front of him. Okay, so this is going to be a frontal important boss. And increases damage taken from Agonizing Claws by 150% for 20 seconds. This effect stacks. So there's 2, presumably the tank is also going to be getting trampled here, so 2 different mechanics that will encourage a tank swap. Probably pretty naturally, it'll be easy to handle both with similar tank swap timings. Erwin has Constricting Thicket, which says, upon reaching 100 energy, Erwin conjures vines and lashes out at all players, inflicting nature damage every second and decreasing their movement speed by 7%. This effect stacks. If uninterrupted, Erwin unleashes a Relentless Barrage. So again, another 100 energy effect that needs to get interrupted. And the Furious Barrage is Javelins at all players that deal nature damage every 1.5 seconds for 30 seconds and stacks. So again, you'll probably wipe if you don't break her. Noxious Blossom says that Airwind showers the ground with blossoms that emit poisonous fumes, doing damage to all players every 3 seconds until destroyed. And they also have an AoE around them, so presumably the idea is that ranged will kill these. Poisonous Javelin launches poison-laced javelins at random players that inflicts nature damage on impact, nature damage over time, and slows them. Upon removal, which it's a poison, so you can poison dispel it, it deals damage to other players within 10 yards. So you're going to want to run out, get dispelled, and then run back in, and poison dispels will be valuable for this. Pip has Song of the Dragon, which is the 100% ability for this of the 3 bosses. Pip begins to sing a captivating song, causing all players to enter a trance and gain an absorb shield. Taking 202,000 damage can break the shield and the trance. After 20 seconds, if any players remain in the trance, Pip finishes the song with a captivating finale on those players, which does damage cause them to dance for their life, inflicting actually not a lethal dot if they're getting healed, right? 100k DPS for 15 seconds. This could maybe be lived with an external if it happens on one player, but yeah, it's going to be interesting. So this is probably a case of while you're in the trance, if you can walk, you probably walk into one of the corrosive pollen AoEs and break yourself out that way. Maybe you'll be attackable by your friends as well, which might also help. Then you can break people out that way. Polymorph Bomb is a heroic difficulty mechanic that launches bolts of magic at random players, transforming them into ducks. Upon removal, transforms other players within 7 yards into ducks. Okay, so it's like the first boss of, or the first boss room in Azure Vault, where you needed to make sure you spread out before people got undispelled. As a duck, harmful poisons slide right off of you. Nature damage taken is reduced by 99%. Consuming a Noxious Blossom removes a stack of Slippery. Upon clearing all stacks, players gain the ability to preen. Preening cleans you out of your duck form, only available when not slippery, and you can also press Quack to leap forward and gain a rush of adrenaline, increasing movement speed by 100% for 6 seconds. So you turn into a duck, you run over the Noxious Blossoms to remove your stacks of slippery, you run out of the raid so that when you preen, you don't turn anybody else into a duck. You preen, you turn into a non-duck, and bang. Cool. Fun little minigame there. And then finally we have Emerald Winds, which causes Pip to summon a massive gust of wind, doing nature damage to all players, and players are pushed away and suffer nature damage over time. There are also, so there's going to be, at the edge of the arena, I guess, there will be winds that you don't want to run into on Heroic and higher, so you'll want to be pushing back and, running against the winds and staying in the middle of the arena, it looks like. All right, I'm reasonably interested to see how this mythic fight works. I like the idea of having to deal with each combo of 2 different bosses reaching 100 energy at the same time. The interaction between, the duck, the song, the Noxious Blossoms, the pollen, all those things, while also managing the tank mechanic of the bear, seem like it'll be reasonably good. And again, this boss does not drop tier, so it'll be a nice early in the raid boss, and that's, I think, a good place to deploy a council fight, usually. So, yeah, cool. All right, let's take a look at Larodar, Keeper of the Flame. This is a tier-dropping boss, and I think this might be one of the... No, I don't think this is a wing end boss, but maybe it is. Let's see. It's dropping 486, Naimu is 486, Smolderon's 486, 489, 489. These ones were 483. And Igira is actually 480, so maybe a second boss that just drops tier somehow. Interesting. Weird sequencing, but... Yeah, okay, so this is still a 486 boss, which is lining up with the Naimu and Smolderon, which I think are also wing end bosses, so maybe this is a wing end boss. And this is, yeah, a Druid of the Flame sort of Dryad thing. I don't know. Let's take a look at what it does. Once a faithful protector of the Grove, Larodar succumbed to the power of the flame. Now the Twisted Guardian is bent on reducing the dream and any who stand in his way to ash. So this is a multi-phase encounter with a stage 1, an intermission, and a stage 2. In stage 1 on Mythic, Larodar twists his fiery grip on players and implants igniting growth inside players, causing players to leave a trail of burning ground and accelerating its burn rate for 15 seconds. Okay, so this might be like a ground, like a firefighter Mimiron style fight where you have the fire slowly overtaking the whole boss arena. There are dream seeds, which say renewed treants channel nature's gift, causing the seeds to blossom. The dream seed lays dormant while wreathed in flames. So you're going to want to not get the dream seed on fire, I guess. Dream Blossom says renewed treant's life energy causes the seed to blossom, allowing 3 players to interact and form a bond with the seed. The final player in the bond flourishes, dousing burning ground and scorching roots, but also draining the dream seed of energy. On Heroic and Mythic, the dream seed causes players who form a bond to gain fatigue, which prevents them from forming another bond for 2 minutes. So you're going to need teams of 3 that go and interact with the seed and use that to clear the burning ground and the scorching roots, which we'll learn about what those do later, I assume. There is the fiery force of nature that Larodar has that summons different types of treants. The fiery treants, which leave behind burning ground, and their melee attacks apply blistering splinters, which is a fire dot. They erupt in explosive bark when killed, which is a 4-yard AoE, and then transform into a charred treant. Charred treants are inert and can be healed by your healers, and when they reach full health, they transform into a renewed treant. Renewed treants channel nature's gift, sacrificing their life to empower the dream seed. When they are killed, they transform back into a fiery treant. Okay, so it's a cycle. You kill the hostile one, you heal the charred one, and then the renewed one empowers a dream seed, but then it turns back into a fiery one again. And this, reduces their maximum health by 3% every 1 second. So after 33 seconds, they turn back in. Okay. Scorching Roots is another mechanic. So Scorching Roots are untargetable and cast Scorching Pursuit when summoned. When they're doused with Dream Blossom, they emerge as Scorching Brambles. They fixate a random player, pursue them, and do fire damage and root people that they touch. Scorching Brambles are targetable, so once you douse them with the Dream Blossom, they become targetable, and you can kill them. Charred Brambles are inert and can be healed, so you kill the Scorching Brambles, they turn into Charred Brambles. When you heal them, they can become a Renewed Bramble Barrier. Renewed Bramble Barriers provide cover against Raging Inferno. When they're destroyed, they erupt in explosive bark. Okay, so that is, again, the 4-yard AoE, but you can stand in them to reduce damage taken from Raging Inferno. So we'll see what that is later as well. Furious Charge is a heroic and higher tank mechanic, focusing Larodar's Fury and charging at his target, doing 1.6 million physical and 800k fire, knocking them away. The damage is reduced the further away the target is knocked. Okay. Wait, the damage is reduced the further away the target is. And he also does 400k physical to all players caught in the path and knocking them back. On Heroic and Mythic, he releases a Furious Outburst when reaching his target, which deals damage to all players, reduced the further away you are. Nature's Fury makes the player hit take 1,000% increased fizz for 20 seconds, which decreases in stacks over time. Huh. So you're going to want this to presumably send your tank is going to want to just run the hell away, not run Larodar through too many people, but run it far away from the raid and also far away from where Larodar is so that the tank doesn't take too much damage and the raid doesn't take too much damage. All right, Blazing Thorns causes a summon of spiral growth of Blazing Thorns that do fire damage and knock people back. At the end of the growth, a Blazing Coalescence is produced, and another spiral growth returns to Larodar. The Coalescence makes orbs that you can absorb to take 166k fire damage and damage over time to 20k every 2 seconds, but you get 20% increased crit. If any of the orbs increase or hit Larodar, then it makes his fire damage go up by 20% for 10 seconds. Okay, if this stacks, if the crit stacks, then I know some people in my raid that will be getting 5 of these orbs and then saying heal me, which I guess we're going to try. It doesn't say that it stacks though, so maybe you want one person soaking each orb or something like that. Raging Inferno says at 100 energy, Larodar deals 2.4 million fire damage to enemies every 2 seconds for 6 seconds, but you can stand behind a renewed Bramble Barrier. After he finishes channeling, he gains a stack of Combusting Presence, which makes him deal 25k every 1.5 second to all players, and also he leaves behind Burning Ground. So maybe he'll start dropping it after he casts his first Raging Inferno of the fight, which will then mean that when he charges, he'll be dropping it as well. Interesting. And it spreads by Larodar. Sorry. Yeah, okay, Larodar. Here it says Larodar, which is Larodar after he's had a few too many Twinkies. Hostile treants and roots, and on its own. So yeah, it is like a Mimiron firefighter type thing where the fire spreads over the whole fight. I see. That is cool. And that means that in the later phases, your tank is going to want to just pop defensives and not charge him too far so that you don't create too much burning ground. But of course, then it's going to hurt the tank more. So, all right, cool. Intermission Unreborn again. Upon reaching 40% health, Larodar draws in and consumes the surrounding flames, doing damage every 0.5 seconds, pulling players in for 16 seconds. If you stand underneath him, you take double damage, basically. The flames combust him, transforming him into the Avatar of Ash, which we don't have a model for here. That stage still has, I guess it has a bunch of new mechanics. Okay, so Falling Embers. Embers fall from the sky, doing fire damage to players within 3 yards of the impact locations. Impacts that fail to hit a player do fire damage and apply a stack of Searing Ash to all players. Flashfire says Larodar attempts to purge several players. Each player erupts after 6 seconds, doing fire damage and applying Encased in Ash to players within 8 yards, which is a big old healing absorb, and when it's removed, it makes a fire whirl around them. So you're going to want to spread when you get Flashfire so that you can then get this on as few people as possible. Smoldering Backdraft is the tank mechanic here, which is a frontal cone that also makes the player reducing healing effects received by 100% and taking fire damage over time. But then they can leech health from all allies within 6 yards every 1 second. So they're going to need to stand on top of at least 3 other players to out-heal the fire damage of this effect. And yeah, that's kind of interesting. That's an interesting tank mechanic. We've seen this mechanic on fights like Unat, Hungering Destroyer in Castle Nathria. But it's interesting here that it's going to land on the tank. And, you know, maybe if you apply a big enough DR to the front end of this, right, to the 1.4 million, and then this, maybe it's not that scary, but 18 seconds is a long time. I assume you're going to need to stand on, you know, if not the whole raid, at least 3 or 4 people to feel comfy as the tank here. But then, of course, those players are going to take the damage. So, yeah, interesting little tank mechanic. Ashen Call calls upon the ashes of the fallen treants. Ashen treants erupt with explosive bark and burning ground, and they leave behind a trail of burning ground. So they don't do the whole cycle of life of treants, but they just do the explosive bark and the burning ground. And they also leave behind a trail of burning ground as well. Searing Ash causes Larodar's transformation to... Okay, so for the rest of the fight, you're going to take a stacking fire dot, is what that's going to do. And then, yeah, burning ground, same mechanic. All right, so it's going to be a... push the boss to 40% with all of these interesting mechanics and the cycle of life of these different ads. And then intermission turns into the Avatar of Fire, burn him down while the world is on fire around you before you run out of space and before you die to the Searing Ash. Cool, sweet looking fight. All right, well, it's been already... like 35 minutes or whatever, a little bit of a longer... I should have known it was going to take a long time because this happened last time that I made these for last patch as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to split this into another video. We will do a part 2 video that will come out tomorrow where we look at Naimu, Smolderon, Tindral Sageswift, and Farak the Blazing and their dungeon journal mechanics as well. These videos tend to get a little bit less, views and stuff than some of my other ones, but I really enjoy making them. Let me know in the comments if you enjoy watching them, and as long as there are some of you that do, I will continue to make them. Hope you've enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.